In this video, I'm going to show you how simple it is to add new player inputs so that the player can press a button and obviously call on a function, which then, of course, calls on certain code to happen. What we're going to do is we're going to create a few uh, uh, abilities that the player will be able to use. So to start, in Puzz player controller, we're going to create variable bool B sneaking and variable bool B sprinting. These are the two abilities we'll be creating. Both of these will obviously have a different impact on how the pawn moves and also whether or not the pawn will make noise. So we also go inside of our Puzz player input class, and inside of there we create a couple exec functions. An exec function basically means that the player is able to call on the function. So it basically says that it can either be a button pressed or the player can go into the console command and put it in and then call on this function that way as well. So the player then can actually call on the code, and that's kind of the purpose of an exec function. So what we have here is exec function sneak, and exec function unsneak, exec function sprint, and unsprint. Inside sneak, we lowered the ground speed to 50%, and we set B sneaking to true. And if we unsneak, we go back to normal speed, and we set it to false. If we sprint, we go 25% faster, and if we unsprint, we go back to normal speed and we turn off sprinting. Also, inside of our Puzz Pawn class, down in Set Walking, we're going to do a couple checks. We're going to say if the Puzz player controller, typecast the controller in there, is sprinting, we make noise 25% louder. Otherwise, if he's sneaking, we don't make any noise, and if he's not doing either one of those, we just make the regular noise, which is 1.0. Okay, so we have the code in place. So if the player were to log in, he could call on this code by typing in, sprint or whatever. But that's not exactly easy to do when you're playing a game. You want to be able to press a button. So we're going to go inside of our default input.ini file in our config file. And we're going to scroll down until we get to an area that says bindings used to organize all game bindable actions. That's what GBA stands for, by the way, game bindable action, in case if you're curious what the acronym stands for as we're looking at it. And what we're going to do is we're going to create two game bindable actions. We have a name GBA underscore sneak, and that command is sneak, and then on release it's unsneak. So when the button's pressed and you hold it, you're sneaking. When you release the button, you're no longer sneaking. For sprinting, same case. When the button's pressed, we call on function sprint, and when we release the button, we unsprint. Now the purpose of GBA sneak and GBA sprint is kind of like a link. It's going to link the function to the key. So now that we have GBA sneak and GBA sprint pointing to the functions, we're going to go down a little bit further until we get to our game keyboard / mouse bindings, and we're going to actually put the letter in, or whatever the button is that you're trying to associate with this function. And we're going to do, for instance, GBA sneak, we're going to overwrite the duck ability, because we're not going to use ducking in this. So we have name C, so we use the button letter C, calls on command GBA underscore sneak. So that kind of links the two together. Also, we're going to get rid of the translocator ability, and we're going to use Q for sprinting. So we have dot bindings Q command equals GBA underscore sprint. Now, you could create one for a different button. If you don't want to overwrite anything, you could use whatever button you can find. Just make sure that you're not trying to call on something that has nothing to do with your game because the button's already been binded in some way. One way you can really check to make sure a button hasn't been binded is not to trust the default input.ini so much, because there's also what's known as a base input.ini that is a lot like this. And both of those are kind of used in order to create your UDK ini. So the best way to really know whether or not you can use a button that's not being used, or you have to overwrite a button, is by going into your UDK input.ini file and looking at the button options in there. And that will really let you know if you're going to be overriding, or actually maybe even adding another thing on top of current things being called by pressing a button. And that completes this video.